Sue Brown likes to say that she is an accidentally successful crab breeder. She started keeping crabs in 2011 for a class project at school and has had different crabs in increasingly luxurious habitats since then. Her first breeding attempt, in January of 2016, was totally unexpected, yielded a partial success, and she experienced an almost vertical learning curve. Her second breeding attempt in December of 2016 was just as unexpected, but the gear from the first attempt and what she had learned helped so much. It's important to stress that Australian crabs have a very abbreviated in-water stage and only spend 10 to 14 days in the water, so it is intense but brief. She left them in the salt pool in the crabbitat until nearly 24 hours later while she cobbled together some gear using a large foam cooler, a couple of mason jars, an air pump, some line and air stones, and a fish tank heater. Total cost was about $10 for the jars and line. She did 33% water changes every 8 hours for 14 days as they grew and shed and changed. By day 12, a few were in shells, climbing up the airline trying to escape. These were transferred to a transition tank with shallow pools and very damp, almost wet, sand for the next phase. She moved 40 from the jars to transition tank and 23 through their first land molt. She now has 3 survivors who are 2.5 years old. One of them is currently in a shell with a 3-centimeter opening. Sue says she will try again at the breeding time in Australia, which is usually October to February. She feels that her story shows crab breeding can be done without any fancy gear as long as you're willing to put in the time and have enough hair to not end up bald with stress. She was also a great inspiration to me in my efforts. So thank you, Sue, and sit back and enjoy her talk.
Way back when, January 11th, 2016, day 1. Morning, crabbies. I'll feed you after I've had my breakfast. Then I did a double take. Oh my goodness, that salt pool wasn't that grotty last night. I'll change it after brekkie. Lucky I've got some ocean water left. I went and had my brekkie and then went back to the tap. When I went to change the water, I looked carefully and I noticed what looked like mosquito larvae. No. Oh dear. I really hope that isn't what I think it is that's making the pool look so bad. What time is it? Actually, I can't remember what time it was, but it was early. And I wanted to know because I needed to ring Natalie now. South Australia is 30 minutes behind New South Wales in time. What the hell, I'll ring anyway. Nat will understand if I wake her up. I sent a phone video quickly first and then called. Nat answered on about the second ring. We talked over the top of each other for about a minute, me in panic and disbelief, and Nat in congratulations and encouragement. I'm not ready. I don't have anything. I can't do this, I kept repeating into the phone. You can do this, and I'll help as much as I can, was Nat's mantra. Natalie Van Amstel was the only person in Australia and one of the very, very few in the world who had been successful. The others that I knew of were Melanie and Daniela from Germany. At this stage, breeding hermit crabs in captivity was still classed as impossible or only for the very well-prepared and dedicated people. I was neither of these. Well, I was a dedicated crabber, but I had no idea if I had it in me to be raising these baby hermits. Once we both calmed down and reality set in, Nat went about telling me what I would need. She said she would do things as needed and that there was a lot to be done, but immediately we needed to decide whether or not I was going to do it. Am I really this crazy? Do I really think I've got a chance of doing something that hardly anyone in the whole world has achieved so far? After a few minutes conversation, Nat said that I should think about it and let her know what I decided. She would support me either way. It is a big undertaking and she would respect if I decided I couldn't do it. So we hung up and I went thinking, nah, can't do this. I'm just an ordinary retired school teacher with no special science training. I did enjoy science at high school though. I don't have anything I need. I can't make a crystal tank in a couple of hours. But wouldn't it be exciting to try? Maybe if I go in as a learning experience with no expectations, it won't matter when I fail. If no one attempts this and fails and learns more, captive bred hermit crabs will never become a reality and the wild populations will soon continue to suffer. Nat will help. I'm retired. I've got the time. I live near the ocean so I can get clean water. I'll need heaps. Where can I put them? It's going to be messy and wet for a while. In the meantime, Nat had sent me a list of supplies I'd need to even start. She suggested cylindrical jars with no chance of dead space. They needed to hold over a litre of water and be stable. Airline, air stones, a pump or two depending on the number of jars and the size of the pumps, lots of salt water for changes, a large container to hold all the jars and fill with fresh water to keep temperature stable, and a fish tank heater. After reading through the list of things, I had a rummage around the house and I found a large foam esky, some spare air stones and line, and a couple of jars from the cupboard. I sent photos of the containers to Nat, but she said they weren't good enough. She liked the esky and said it would be good as it would help keep the temperature stable. Off I went to town to the $2 shop in search of jars. I found some and took photos and sent to Nat while I was in the shop. Yep, they'd be fine. On to the pet store for an aquarium heater. While I was there, I also bought some little floating thermometers that could bob up and down in the jars, and a pump with a dual outlet. I actually don't know when I decided I would have a go at raising them. It probably only happened due to the adrenaline rush and getting caught up in the thrill. When I got home, I needed to have a look at all the things and work out where to set up. I was looking at 2 weeks or so, as Aussies have a very abbreviated cycle in the water. Yet less time I didn't have. Anyway, it appeared I was going to have an attempt. I called Nat again and told her I decided to go. She just about jumped through the phone in excitement. I was now concerned as it was getting on in the day and the zoea were in the tadpool still. Nat said they would be fine there. Temperature was good and I had an air stone in there and they were still looking good. Well, I thought they were at least. So I got organising. The logical place for the setup was in the laundry. Here in Australia, we have our washing machines and laundry tubs in their own small room. I had a school desk which fitted right beside the washing machine against the end wall. There were power points to run the pump and the lights and the heater, and the list was so long. The washing machine could act as a workbench, and the tub was right there with water available. The floor was tiles, so it didn't matter if I made a mess. I put the esky on the table and filled it with fresh water, 50% hot water, 50% cool, hoping all the time it didn't have holes and wouldn't leak. It had just been hanging around in the garage for who knows how long. I put the aquarium heater in and set it to 30 degrees to heat the water. That would take a while, so I had a little bit of time to do the rest of the things. Then I checked my saltwater supply. I'd been using fresh ocean water from my nearby beach. It's a 30-minute drive each way, a beautiful area, and the water is crystal clear. I figured that this is the water the Zoea were currently living in, and they were doing okay, so it would be best to keep going with that. I had about 10 litres, so I'd need to get some more soon, but Nat had said water changes were not too critical for the first day or two, so that gave me a bit of time. Apparently, our little guys don't eat for the first couple of days, so until they die or skins are shed, there would be no waste in the water. Phew, that was a relief. Oh my God, food. What am I going to feed these guys? I put fresh water into the jars and put bubblers in to see how effective the water circulation was. It looked good. Another video to Nat, and she said, yep. But don't forget to warm the water in the jars before you add the Zoea so they don't die of shock at the temperature change. Okay, I hadn't even thought of that. More salt water into a plastic 3-litre container in the bath to warm up. Not much salt water left now, so I'll have to go in the morning. Yeah, I've got to refill the tap pool when I tip them in here. Better not forget. Then I tipped the fresh water from the jars and filled them about halfway with clean salt water. They can now warm up and get ready. Please remember, less than 24 hours have passed at this stage. Yesterday, I didn't even know I had a crab carrying eggs. If I can do this from being that unprepared and being one of the very, very early people to be successful, you guys can do it for sure. Mary will help, I will, and there's probably about half a dozen or so now who'll give you advice and guidance. I collapsed in a heap on the lounge and sat there staring at the crab tank with all those thousands of potential crabbies who were now relying on me for a chance of life. Tomorrow, guys, I can't do any more today. Early the next morning, I got up and went to look at the crab tank. I'm not totally sure I was relieved to see that the babies were still happily swimming around. And I looked just the same as yesterday. It looked like I was actually going to have to go through with this crazy plan. Off to the laundry to check the setup. All good, temperature was fine, and the little thermometers in the jars were reading 28. The heater in the bath was set on 30 and the jars were quite thick. They needed to be stable in the water. Right, this is it, I thought. So I set up a towel in the washing machine and took one of the jars out and put it into the tub. Then I got the pool out of the tap and took it to the laundry. Here goes nothing, I thought, as I tipped the water from the tap pool into the jar in total. The clean water made it look so much better, as there was a greater volume of water to spread the Zoea around. There were none sinking to the bottom and no bodies as far as I could tell. Totally amazing, seeing this was 24 hours at least, possibly closer to 30, that they had been in the tap pool. I already had been thinking how best to do this, to share the Zoea into the other jars. I got a baby medicine dropper and started sucking up the Zoea. and transferring them to the clean jar. That took forever, but finally I had about a third of them in the clean jar with no tap water. I wanted to dilute the murky water more, so I tried to link the air line with the stocking over the end to stop the zoea being sucked up, to siphon the excess water off. This was a total fail as the line was too fine and the stocking clogged instantly. So I just siphoned the water out into a glass bowl and then used the eyedropper to put the zoea back into the jar. After doing this and having 2 jars of zoea back in the water bath, I went ahead and rinsed the tap pool in fresh water and added new salt water, ready for it to go back into the tank. I put the mangrove seed pod back in and noticed about 5 zoea swimming around in the tap pool. These must have been caught up in the mangrove roots. That had just been lying in the air, on the towel, on top of the washing machine all the time I'd been fiddling with the pools and jars. These guys were fighters, I thought, so they deserved a chance too. I got the medicine dropper out again and they went into one of the jars. That's it, done, I thought, and walked away. At this stage, I still don't know what day I'm up to, but I think I'm up to day 3 or 4. Although all through this attempt, I was really playing catch up as I was so unprepared. The next slide shows a slow motion of the jars at 8 a.m. on the 13th, which is January, day 3 or 4, I think. As the time flies by in a blur, I'm becoming more confident. Up to day, 4, January the 14th, and for some reason I'm up at 6:30 in the morning. I see dead bodies. But later in the day, after discussions with Nat and Aussie JJ Dude on the forum, I realised that they are actually shed skins and I have zoea at stage 2. So whatever I'm doing, it seems to be working. About 2100, I decide to tip all of the water out into a glass bowl and eyedropper the swimmers back into the jars with totally clean water. This took about 2 hours and the water ended up a bit murky with all the hundreds of little squirts after each transfer. Lots of shed skins in the bowl though. 15th of January, still not sure what day it is. Well, the numbers are dropping drastically. Not many dead bodies, but maybe they're eating the dead or the skins and the bodies are being broken up by the bubbles. This morning I put a biofilter into jar 2. This is a soft foam filter and I was hoping it would help keep the water cleaner. But it appears that the suction is too great and many bodies were on the foam. I carefully removed them and put them back into the jar and removed that biofilter murder and replaced it with an air stone. But most of the zoea in that jar are sinking to the bottom. Put this on my list of things not to do next time. Wait, what did I just say? Am I crazy enough to even been contemplating a next time? We've worked out that it's day 6, we think, on the 16th of January. And according to Daniela from my video in the forum, I have all megalopas and they need shells immediately. Luckily, in my spare time, yeah, I did have some. I've been sorting through a bag of bird shell grit with magnifying glass and a pin. I have a handful of tiny, tiny shells that I now add into the jars. The megas show interest immediately, and it's funny to watch them trying to work out how to get their butts into the shells. I transferred 7 into another jar, which is jar 3, to reduce the numbers. This has been such an exciting, nerve-wracking, amazing few days that I'm glad I've attempted. And even now, I may be successful. My mind is a spin, as is my body. I was always rushing to get stuff organised, as I'm always a day behind where my babies are at, I think. Considering I wasn't even going to attempt it, and everything is totally makeshift, I'm really pleased. If nothing else, I have learnt heaps for the next time. Damn, there I go again, thinking about doing this, and next time? Day 7, 17th of January. None of the 7 transferred have made it, but there are still quite a few others in the main jar. They're swimming up to the top to check out the shells that are floating there due to air trapped in them, and also checking out the shells on the bottom of the jars. They are still eating each other, but they're also eating the fish food I'm trying, I think. As Daniela pointed out, Variabilis only need about a week to this stage. The ones she and Melanie raised needed between 25 and 60 days to shell stage. For this, I am totally grateful in many ways, as I don't think I could have done this for that long. In other ways, though, I would have liked more time to prepare for the next stages. Every time someone tries to breed, the whole community can learn from it. This is the food I used. It's hard, but it sinks and then softens. The mega can grab it from the bottom and rip it off to eat. I'm now madly trying to get stuff together for the transition tank. I wonder how many, if any, will make it that far. 2 water changes today, feeding at 3 to 4 hourly intervals. Some even smaller shells were added today, thanks to a care package from Natalie. These were spiral water snail shells, and the mega was still very interested, but none in shells yet. Last water change at 18:15. and by later in the evening it was still quite clear. I added some prime to the jars tonight, so that may be why it's a little clearer. No, I can't remember if I was adding prime before this, as I haven't said in my notes on the forum, but I'm certain Nat would have insisted I do so as soon as they started shedding. Sadly, I'm still seeing body parts, which means they are still eating each other. I also started organising for the transition tank today. This slide shows the transition tank from my first attempt on the left and the second on the right. I use clear plastic containers designed for screws and bolts. They're about 8 centimetres deep and have a ramp up the front, but it's pretty steep. Both pools had bubblers in them. Attempt 1, I used a sea sponge in them for the crabs to climb up. In the second attempt, I'd added coarse river sand to the ramp on one, and it worked really well. That was in the photo a couple of slides back. I also had a piece of soft black anti-slip matting, but this nearly caused a flood as it actually soaked water up and into the sub. So I removed it and added some more sub. In the initial stages, both transition tanks were in a foam esky with a heat mat between the tank and the esky. Attempt 1, I also had a heat mat near the pools. This was removed at attempt 2, so the water didn't get too warm. Nat said the sand needed to be wetter than in the normal crab habitat, as the crabs would dehydrate really easily. Also that the tank needed to be warmer than the normal, so I set it at 30 degrees and made sure the sand was like at the high tide mark at the beach. Some made it to land in my first attempt, but none survived. In the second attempt, I had 26 to land, and 20 of them survived to land crabs. About 13 went into the big final tank about a year later, and now, 3 years and 7 months on, I have 2 of those left from the second group. The picture of the second transition tank is after I'd removed the transition pools. I had a heap of stuff in there for them to climb on. I also added twigs of bottlebrush, banksia, hakea, tea tree and New South Wales Christmas bush from my garden. These are all native Australian plants. The crabs loved climbing all over these. Day 8, I think. My babies are in shells. How is this possible? I've managed it? Surely not. Late in the evening, I transferred the first one into the pool in the transition tank. This may well have been too soon, as it turned out. Day 9, the 19th, I transferred another crab to the transition tank in the morning, and 4 more were ready later that day. They're climbing up the stick that I put in the jars so that they could get above the surface of the water level if they wanted to, or they're climbing up the airline. By the end of today, I had transferred 11 into the transition tank. By the 11th day, somehow, I'm not sure if it was the 10th, but anyway, by the 20th of January, I now had 15 in the transition tank in the pool. This photo shows one of the shelled mega inside the meniscus of a water bubble on its way out of the transition pool. By the end of the 20th of January, one crab had done a huge marathon and left the pool and gone about 20 centimetres across the damp sand. The next morning it was still in the same place, but I thought it could be doing the final morph into land crab, so I wasn't too sad. A second one had left the pool overnight and was on the sand, and there was a third who had only transferred the previous evening, when I discovered it climbing up the airline in the jar, had made its way out of the water onto the sea sponge, but then it went back into the water. Here's photos showing a couple of them on their way out, and one decided it was going back in. Today, however, was also a sad one, as there was no movement of the remaining shells in the transition pool. I took them out and looked carefully. I sent photos to Nat, and it seems that they had tried to do their final morph into land crabs while still in the pools, and had drowned. This may well have been because the water was too warm and they rushed their transitions, or they may not have been able to get out. I kept the jars and the transition tank going until the 25th, but there was no movement in either, so I called time. A huge learning curve, not only for me, but also the crab community. During the first attempt, my water was close to 30 degrees in the transition tank. After these deaths and at the end of my attempt, Nat and I discussed this, and we decided that this may have been the cause. During my second attempt, I kept the water at 26 in the jars and 28 in the pool. The second attempt took longer between stages, and I was actually successful in getting crabs to land and through their final morph into land crabs. 11 months on, attempt number 2. This slide shows 3 or 4, I think, of the babies going up the gravel from the transition pool to the sand. Most of these guys made it. I ended up with 26 baby crabs to start with. Improvements this time. I have a far better idea how old they are, to within about 12 hours. So Sunday, the 4th of December 2016 is certainly day 1. I'm actually a bit more prepared for this now. I have already modified the transition pool, as you can see in the photo, by adding the coarse sand to the exit wrap. We think that this may have been the issue with many dying in their final molt in the pool last time. And the water was too warm last time, so I have moved the heat mat away from this end of the pool. I'm ready to document this attempt way better than last one. The next slide will show you the difference in the timing between stage 1, stage 2 mega and shells, and when I move them to the transition tank. My baby hermit crab pantry from my second attempt. Basically all I did was crush up in a mortar and pestle mostly the food that I fed to the adults and put them in these little jars. They're designed for scrapbooking but were a great size. You can see by the labels what I was feeding them. They got a variety and they loved it all.